Good evening. This is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined this week by former United striker Phil Marsh to talk over a very eventful week at United. How are you doing, Phil? You all right?
Yeah, all good, Wayne. Feeling good. Had a busy week in work this week, so a little bit tired tonight. But yeah, looking forward to the weekend. Obviously, I've got my football tomorrow, and then looking forward to the Arsenal game on Sunday. So that should be, good weekend, packed full of football.
Yeah, and good for it as well. And you know, it has been a mixed week for United. Really, we'll start off talking about City because obviously we previewed it last week. It was a strange one because I guess we were all talking about, the value of consistency. They'd made a few changes for Charlton, and then the changes for the team sheet. To be honest, they looked quite concerning. We saw Shaw lining up at centre back when you saw Fred in midfield. We put in a good performance, a really good performance, one of the best that we've seen under Ten Hag. Fantastic display in the second half, I felt, especially once we'd gone behind, because I think that was the thing for me. We saw City take the lead, and then it was kind of like a big question: what are these players made of? They didn't have half time to sort of regroup. They had to sort of figure it out by themselves. And yes, I know Ten Hag made the change at half time. He made another one, bringing on Garnacho for Ericsson. So it was a good change, but the players by and large had to figure it out for themselves. And they did. It was a really strong end to the game. One of those moments where the goosebumps go, like Old Trafford was absolutely rocking, possibly. I've seen it like that for the Ronaldo game when he returned against Newcastle, and then obviously the performance was miles apart. The one that we put on Saturday. A lot of controversy around the game as well, considering Bruno's goal and Rashford being offside. I still think that United can say that they fairly deserved the win. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, agree with everything you've just said there. I think obviously post match when you see the team line up, you've probably got your sort of reservations about certain players and how big a game it was. But as you said, I thought all the players did really well. I think the first half was a little bit of a. I mean, it was a good game, but I don't think sort of anything really got going until the second half. And then, as you say, when we went 1-0 behind, there's some changes been made. I think United shown that character, and after being on such a good run, it was great to see that we sort of had that character and the sort of mental strength really to come back. In a massive game that I think would have been, if we'd have lost that game, that could have been, mentally and sort of, took a lot of energy out of the team. I think, winning that game was massive. And I think, as you just said, it's fair play to the players, the manager, they've all, got that winning mentality now. You can see that there's, no giving up. There's no, heads dropping. I think the crowd was still, right behind them, even when they went behind. And, it was brilliant. And I think, that win has sort of, kept us and obviously we still are in for the title run. I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, saying I think this year, a top four finish and a trophy would be, a really good sort of bit of progress by the manager and a stepping stone to the right direction we want to be in. But obviously we find ourselves now in a position where if we can, pick up a result against Arsenal on Sunday, then we're right in the mix. And with the way the team's been playing, we've got really good individual players in great form. As I said, the team spirit and the camaraderie seems like it's all there. Everyone who's coming in is doing a job when they've been called upon, and everything seems like it's going well really at the moment. Obviously, we'll come on to the Palace game in probably a little while. I think obviously that was a bit of a setback the other night, but I wouldn't get too disheartened and disappointed about that. I think, as I said, the club's in a far better place at this moment in time, and that City game was brilliant for everyone involved with the club. I think it's a marker of how far we've come in such a short space of time, really.
Yeah. Dave says, good evening, boys. Good to see you both. Good evening, Dave. Oh, good afternoon for you. Hope you're all right, mate. Good morning, even. Is it 8 hours? Yeah, so it's still morning for Dave. What's your take on the Rashford, the Bruno goal then? Because everyone's talking about it. The one thing that I guess the thing that I don't think I've really seen discussed is this conversation that they're talking about with Edison and Akanji. So they Akanji's, his run is one thing, and whether or not he would have run faster or slower if Rashford had not been there, or whether he's whatever. I think that's a false argument, because if you're saying Rashford's not there, then there's another player there. There's 10 players on the pitch, and the ball's still moving and Bruno's still running. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of a difficult argument, that, but the one about Edison's positioning is a bit funny, because everyone's saying he doesn't know to set himself up for. And that always reminds me of the Fabian Barthez incident, where he puts his hand up for Paulo Di Canio. The point is that he's got to be playing to the whistle, and if everybody thought that Rashford was offside, as he was, then he shouldn't have been trying to play funny beggars with the referee and prepare for Rashford, because the point is he needs to be preparing for Bruno, because Bruno was definitely, nobody thought he was offside. The ball was still in play, the ball was still running. What did you make? I mean, you're a forward. You're in a position where I guess you probably favour where the offside for attackers is beneficial for the attackers, like it has been the interpretation. And there has been a lot of talk about this one. Let's be frank about it. If that was given against us, we'd be furious.
Exactly.
But yeah, go on. What did you
exactly that. I think, obviously from a Man City perspective, getting that goal given against you, you're going to be raging. You're going to be saying, what's going on. But them kind of decisions over the course of the season, some will go for you, some won't. I think we've seen that in every other game. Really, there's been decisions where it's been VAR and people aren't quite sure, and is it or isn't it? And I think that's just where we are at this moment in time with the game. And for me, obviously, from my perspective as a striker, I thought Rashford did brilliant, because you've got a tendency sometimes as a centre forward, regardless of whether you think you're onside or offside, is when you're through on goal, your first thought is, right, how can I score, and where am I going to put this ball? And I think what he really did, what was brilliant, was as he ran through, I think he's realised just before he was about to maybe make his decision on where he was going to put the ball that, oh, hang on a minute, I am offside, and Bruno's obviously coming in and he's got an opportunity to score here. So by leaving the ball and not actually making an attempt to sort of strike the ball, I think that is probably why the goal's been given. Because I think if he does actually make the movement with his leg and swings at it and then pulls his leg away, I think that's obviously then going to be deemed as, you're interfering, because Edison probably makes a movement or a gesture that he's going to go the way of where he thought Rashford was going to go. So it's one of them. As I said, I think from a City perspective, you're going to be not happy about it, but I think there's decisions that get made all the time where clubs are getting points took off them because it's a wrong decision or a controversial decision, and then a couple of weeks later you might get one in your favour. And I think to be honest, we've more than deserved that little bit of the rub of the green in that performance, because as you said, second half, I think the players did everything they could to get the 3 points, and fully deserved, in my opinion, that we got that win.
Yeah, Dave says 100% I'd be fuming if that was scored against us, but we don't make the rules, and there's a current letter of the law stands that's onside. It's only news because it's United, and I think that's a fair point as well. I mean, the point is the law is an ass, and we've had some dodgy offsides go for us, and I think the thing is, like, these kind of things like VAR was supposed to take these kind of arguments out of the game, and they haven't really, because it's still subjective. He's still arguing the toss over certain things. That was always my apprehension with it. Do you know what I mean? That you're not eliminating arguments, you're just creating new arguments.
And I think, Wayne, as well, just on that, obviously since that goal happened, we've seen on social media there's been loads of goals with similar sort of things happening, where players have had a ball played through to him, they've sort of gone towards as though he was going to do it and then left it. Someone else from in onside positions ran through and scored, and it's not the first time that it's happened, and it's not going to be the last, I'm sure. But as you say, it's one of them. If you get it given for you, you made up, and if it's against you, you're obviously not going to be happy, because it's one of them grey areas really what needs sort of ironing out. as there's a few at the moment with the VAR system.
Dave says Rashford should be getting high praise for the role. He's rolling the goal, like Phil said. He knew he couldn't touch it. It brings us on to Palace, really, because and I was talking about this on the podcast I do with Ed. There's no question about that podcast. And we were talking about the referees carrying decisions into the next game, and how they're influenced by what's going on in the media. And you couldn't help but notice that there was 4 days constant saturation of the stupid, incessant nonsense about this decision. It never stopped. And United are playing Palace. They score a goal through a good passage of play that didn't look like it belonged in that half of football. And it was really nice, really incisive. Don't get me wrong, United did play some pretty passages in the first half, but nothing like that. It came out of the blue, really, the goal. And then the second half, it was a bit flat. Looks like we're going to get a penalty. Oh, I should say that. It looks like we should get a penalty. And the referee's just instantly waving it away. He's not even going to look at VAR on, asking him to come and have a look at it. Because they don't think it's clear and obvious. And then United don't really push for that second goal. They don't look to kill the game off. Casemiro gets a yellow card with 10 minutes to go. And then if you are a fatalist, if you're going to look at the some of the reaction, it's like the whole world fell apart in 10 minutes. Casemiro gets a yellow card. United concede a free kick that was slightly generous for Palace to get the free kick in the first place from Luke Shaw. But a great strike, perfect strike. In fact, off the crossbar, De Gea, who made a couple of great saves earlier, can do nothing for that. It's so good. And it earns Palace a draw. United come and react in the last couple of minutes of extra injury time. But even though Casemiro has that chance, he doesn't score. So I was saying about Charlton and the changes, Phil. So he makes the changes against Charlton, rings them like 8. I think it's 8 first teamers out, and he keeps 3 in. And then against City, he makes a couple of big decisions that are unfamiliar that we wouldn't expect. And then against Palace, when you were probably thinking he might wrap a couple of players up in cotton wool, he goes with the strongest side. And then Casemiro gets booked. It looks like he's a bit angry because Bruno sort of lost the ball or he shirks the tackle a little bit. So Casemiro's gone into this angry tackle and gets a yellow card for it, which at first glance I thought could be a red, but I think probably a yellow is about right. And then, obviously they score. It looks like a terrible result. I mean, we don't lose the game and it's still 9 wins and a draw. But I guess it's one of those where, especially in the sort of like 10, 15 minutes or a couple of hours after the game, or even the day after, really, it still felt like it's like a bit of a defeat. I guess I'll start with the lineup. Starting Casemiro, obviously a bit of a gamble. It was always going to be, but United aren't really in a position where they can afford to rotate in any Premier League game, really. We saw last season that McTominay and Fred have and I'm not, they've got the qualities, but together they're not a midfield capable of dominating the possession or the tempo of any Premier League game. So I can see why he played him. Do you think that he took a risk that he shouldn't have?
Yeah, I think it's quite easy now in hindsight to sort of criticise the manager because obviously what happened with the yellow card and then obviously conceding that goal. But I think in the manager's thought process, he's probably thinking, let's start the strongest team. Let's get, 1 or 2 goals up and then, we can make a few changes in the second half when the game's wrapped up. Obviously, I didn't watch the game on Wednesday. I had training, but I obviously watched the extended highlights. And as you say, I think the first half, there wasn't really much going on. Obviously, we scored that goal, which was a great goal by Bruno. And then obviously, into the second half, I think, we sort of huffed and puffed, didn't really create anything. And then, that penalty claim, if that's given, and we put that in the back of the net, the game goes to 2-0. I think that's the exact moment that the manager makes the change and takes Casemiro off. The game's sort of wrapped up. You can wrap a few players in cotton wool and save them ready for Arsenal, but because that's not given and the game's still sort of in the balance, I think he's kept the players on to try and get that second goal. And as you say, I think Casemiro's that kind of player, whereas he's took one for the team there really by not letting Zaha go through and potentially driving into the box. And unfortunately, yeah, it was a definite yellow card. There's no question about that. But it's obviously a massive blow now that he's not going to be involved on Sunday, because I think that midfield is probably going to be where the game's won and lost. I think Arsenal's midfield at the minute is probably one of the best in the league, if not Europe. I think Odegaard and Partey especially, two players in really good form. So it's obviously a massive blow for us that we're not going to have Casemiro in that game. But we beat him at Old Trafford without Casemiro, so it has been done. And obviously that late goal with Elise putting it in the top corner off the crossbar is like a sort of double whammy. I said that to you before we sort of come on air, that that was like a double sort of kick in the teeth with losing Casemiro, and then that 2 points being dropped with the last kick of the game effectively. But again, as you say, 10 games unbeaten. We're in a good run of games. Obviously, we've got a lot of winnable games coming up, and you've just got to keep trusting in the process. I think the managers made massive progress with the team. The players all seem to be gelling and bonding, and we're playing a lot better football than we have been previously. And yeah, I think as I say, Sunday's a massive game. If we can win that game, then that definitely puts the cat among the pigeons, and I think it could be a result which defines the rest of the season. Really, I think if we can get a positive one, I think that's what we need to be aiming for. And as I say, we're the only team that's beat Arsenal this year, so let's try and make it a double. And we've done quite well, at Arsenal over the years. So it's not somewhere that we don't enjoy going. I think it's a game that we all should be looking forward to, really.
Yeah, we've got a good record there. It's probably a couple of years since we got a win. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean in recent years, but over the course of the Premier League, I think we've done quite well.
Yeah.
Away at Arsenal, so
yeah,
let's
definitely.
it's another.
Nikos says evening. Oh, Robbie says hello, lads, up as well. Evening, Robbie. Hope you're doing all right. Dave has a question for you, Phil. Wan-Bissaka, is he now our first choice right back? The guy has been unreal since he got back into the team. His forward play has also improved tenfold since a year ago. I must admit, I'm not as enthusiastic about Dave with his forward play, but defensively, he's been absolutely rock solid, and obviously game-saving tackle at the end against Zaha. What do you make of this resurgence?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Dave. I think at this moment in time, he's definitely our first choice right back. I think he's definitely been working on the training ground on a lot of things. I think he's came back and, to be fair to the lad, he's had a lot of criticism. There's been a lot of talk of him being moved on after a big money move, and he didn't quite get that opportunity when Dalot sort of was in the team because of he's maybe not as good going forward, which I get. But for me, I think since he's came back, he's looked like a different player. Defensively, there's probably not many better for me in terms of 1v1 defending in the league, if not the world. I think he's that good at the sort of 1v1 defending and not letting that player get past him and get a cross in. Yeah, he still needs to work on going forward and other little parts of his game, but for me at this moment in time, he's doing everything that he needs to keep that position, because even some of the stuff against City, when he was just beating a few players and just keeping the ball in tight situations, as a Man United player, sometimes you get put in them awkward positions and situations. You've got to be able to deal with that, and to be fair, he's looked really good, and his attitude, you can't fault him. He doesn't look like he's sort of been moaning and not putting the effort in training. So give him a run of games and let's see how he gets on. But for me, he's definitely deserving of his shirt at this moment in time.
Yeah, you would say the last couple of games, or I would. His last couple of games probably been his best for the club. Been outstanding, especially against City. That little dribble that he did where he went past 4 or 5 players, that I think that was the ignition, wasn't it? It really turned the crowd up and got the team sort of the airs on the back of the next to the team was great as well. Robbie's got a good question, and we're coming into Arsenal now anyway, so it's a good topic to start with the Arsenal game. He says he's really looking forward to Sunday. Well, at least one of us is, because I don't know if I'm looking forward to it as much. It's a great feeling not dreading the game anymore. Now, I definitely agree with that. He says it's a big call in midfield. What is your thinking? This is the big one, isn't it? Phil, like what is he going to do with that combination? And I mean, the obvious answer is that he's going to play McTominay or Fred. But and as Nico says, McFred back on Sunday. I mean, the thing is with Ten Hag, he doesn't do the obvious. Well, I don't think he always does the obvious so far. So you might even see a bit of a surprise in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of them. You could go back to the McFred. He could play one. But as you say, with this manager at the moment, you know, he's sort of keeping us all on our toes with the team selections. So it's going to be an interesting one to see what he goes with. For me personally, I think Fred on the City game was brilliant. So for me, he'd probably get the nod, maybe just slightly ahead of McTominay at this moment in time. But yeah, it's anyone's guess really with that one, because as you say, the manager's sort of chopped and changed and maybe played players when he wasn't expecting it at certain times. So again, you know, that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on, really, because I think, as I say, that's going to be where the game's won and lost for me in that midfield, because the form players for Arsenal certainly are sort of in that middle part of the pitch, as well as, you know, Saka. I think, you know, Odegaard and Partey have been integral really for their success in you know, the last couple of months.
Yeah. Nikos says Bruno on the right. Robbie says Martinez in midfield, which is a big call. And Dave says Phil Jones, obviously. Well, he has yet to have his game of the season. So, and when he does play, he normally plays very well. Patrick says, evening, Patrick. Normally joins us on Monday morning, so it's good to see you, mate. He says, evening, guys. The surprising midfield could be Lisandro Martinez. You read it here first. And Nikos says Martinez he's never played for us there, which is a good point, because he hasn't. And I mentioned it in the midweek at some point, just because I thought Shaw's played so well at centre back and Malassi has played so well at left back lately that it frees up that kind of area. Obviously, Martinez you would expect to play. I guess the alternate way of looking at that is they could play a 5-man defence, you know, with Shaw and Martinez in there, and sort of pack out the midfield with McTominay or with Ericsson. And like Dave says, yeah, Ten Hag has stated in the past that Martinez is not suited to that position. Can't see it happening. What do you reckon? Are you gonna, if you're picking a team, are you putting Martinez? First of all, you're picking him, and where are you picking him? Are you going to put him right back in the heart of defence?
I don't know. It's because obviously Luke Shaw's been doing so well, and he obviously played him against City, and you know, was magnificent that day against Haaland, which, you know, everyone would have been looking at that as a potential mismatch. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. As I say, I think Luke Shaw's at this moment in time, he's undroppable. So whether he's playing at centre half or he's playing at left back, it's going to be interesting to see. I think he's got a couple of big decisions, as you say. That one with the Martinez there. Does he play him in midfield? Does he play him at centre half? Is Luke Shaw going to play at centre half, or is he going to play at left back? Do you put in Fred? Do you put in McTominay, or both? I think he's got a lot of, because of that Casemiro booking, I think he's been now forced into maybe a real headache of who plays where, and trying to sort of, you know, fill the jigsaw before Sunday, because we've got that many good players at the moment. He probably feels as though he doesn't want to leave, you know, likes of Martinez out the team, but, you know, at the detriment of you know, maybe, you know, certain styles and formations. So we'll just have to see it. I mean, I don't envy him, to be honest. I think, you know, he's got a difficult decision to be made there with the team selection for Sunday.
Yeah, it's not just that; it's the front line as well. I mean, Anthony has been a bit of hot. He was good against City when he came on, I thought, but a little bit flat against Palace after a decent start. Rashford obviously is in good form, despite the fact they didn't necessarily play brilliantly against Palace. And then you've got Weghorst, who, you know, he was.
How did he the other day? Because obviously on the highlights, I didn't really get a proper reflection of You know,
Quiet, I would say quiet. I mean, guys, put in the comments how you thought Vegos did against Palace, and I'll put some comments up. But I thought he was quiet. He had one good chance when Shaw crossed it, and I say good chance. I think he fashioned that chance. It was a chance that only he could have. Because of his height, he did quite well with it. And if it was Martial, for example, I don't think he would have done well. But then you compare it to Martial against City because he was very poor for that first half. And then obviously Anthony came on, Garnacho came on, and it's I look at it and I wonder if he's possibly a better option from the bench. I don't know if the midfield conundrum against Arsenal, I'm talking about against Arsenal at the weekend, that you pack out that midfield or that you pack out the defence and you say two up top, Rashford and another, whether that's Bruno from wide or whether it's Garnacho supporting, and then try and win the game in those areas. But yeah, I thought he was quiet. He came deep a lot. He was joining in the play and those kind of things. He was tidy. I don't think United were looking for him for crosses, like sometimes you do with a taller striker.
yeah.
And I don't know. It was one of those difficult ones to call. What did you make of him from what you saw from the highlights?
Yeah, as I say, I mean, from what I've seen in the highlights, he had a couple of nice little layoffs and stuff. He looked like he, held it up at times quite well. But with it being his first game, it's going to be difficult to come into to the team and sort of hit the ground running straight away with, not having much training and not really knowing the sort of, the players and the way they sort of play. But yeah, I mean, he looked okay. I think, as we probably all know, I think it's a short-term fix. I don't think moving forward in terms of getting to where we want to be and consistently challenging for trophies, he's going to be the answer. But for a short term, maybe till the end of the season, this having this sort of different player who's got different attributes and can maybe offer something a little bit different will sort of come in handy in certain games.
Yeah. Last one for tonight, a bit of a shorter pod. Obviously, United going on Arsenal and everyone's talking about a title race. I still think it's a little bit premature because Arsenal playing their 19th game of the season, so that's halfway through. We're on 20, so we're just a little bit over the hill in that regards. And it's like 6 points. It could be 3 points. It could be more than that. And we've seen, 20, 22, 23 games where there's been gaps of 12. Do you know what I mean? I still look at it and I think we're ahead of schedule. If we're not in a title race this season, I'm not going to be too critical. So yeah, all right. If we lose on Sunday, I'll be upset. But at the same time, I'm looking at thinking, well, we're ahead of where I thought we were going to be. We've still got an identity which I didn't think that we would have. We've got a manager who's clearly got control, and I wasn't completely convinced that we would get that. That the manager would be allowed that, but he's there. He's got a style. He's got a shape. He's got control. The team are playing well. The players who we thought last season would not have the character to respond have by and large shown that they do. We can say McTominay initially did when Casemiro was signed because he played well. Fred's definitely played well in his cameos. We haven't seen enough of Maguire because obviously it looks like he's been integrated out of the side. Luke Shaw has definitely stepped up. Dalot has. Wan-Bissaka has. So all of the things that I would have wanted Ten Hag to do, probably thinking over his first season, he's probably achieved in the first 6 months. Don't get me wrong. Yes, time is not finite. You've got to, infinite, I should say. Time is not infinite. You don't get every season to try and rebuild and challenge for a title. So you've got to take the chances while they're there. I just think until you're like 30 games into a season, it's not technically a title race. And while I want us to be in it, Phil, that's what I want us to be in it. But I look at it and think, I don't want to be criticising him for not being in a title race when we're ahead of what I thought we were going to be. What do you make of it, the start of it?
No, I totally agree with what you just said there, Wayne. I think, this season for me, I always said top 4 and a trophy would be massive progress and would be an ideal scenario. I think because we find ourselves, in a really good position, I think naturally as a fan, you're going to get a little bit carried away and maybe think, we're in a title race and we are in a title race, don't get me wrong. But as you just said, if we lose a couple of games and we maybe, fall off a little bit and other teams start to get a bit of a lead, but we stay in that, 3rd, 4th position, I think, as you've just said, we've made massive progress this year. Players as a group have all, pulled together after a lot of, hard times and things that have been going on with the Ronaldo saga and all that kind of stuff. And the start of the season we had, especially with them 2 losses. But yeah, I think, the squad looks really healthy at this moment in time. We've got a lot of competition for places, which is great, which is always, what you need for a successful side. I think, obviously, I've mentioned this a few times now, we're not far off having a really, really good side that can compete for me in terms of, next season, if we can get a number 9, a Harry Kane or someone like that Oshiman's been mentioned. If we can get someone like that in, then for me, you look at our starting 11 and, it's up there with the best. And with the players that we've got, obviously, to come off the bench and the squad rotation that we've got now, I'm really happy with the progress that's been made. And yeah, if we can get a result against Arsenal and keep them, the winning run going and see where that takes us, amazing. But if not, and we do maybe have a couple of, bad results and things don't, go quite to plan, but we can still finish in that top 4, fans need to sort of just have a little rethink to where we was sort of, 12, 18 months ago and see how much progress we've made in such a short amount of time. And, the manager's been fantastic with all these big decisions he's had to make with players and decisions and, all that. And I think he's dealt with all that magnificently. And for me, he's the man to take us forward and back to sort of the glory days in the coming years, because if he's made that much progress in this amount of time, imagine hopefully where we might be in, a couple of years' time.
Yeah. Robbie says top 4 for us this year and a cup, and I'll be delighted. I think that's probably my estimation of what I would hope for. I say hope for. I'm hoping for the title, but I think I think that's a really strong first season, and I think everything you've just said there about Ten Hag's, what he's done in this first season, I think
it's been really challenging for him. When you actually think of all the stuff he's had to, deal with in terms of, the start to the season with, losing them 2 games, especially the 4-0 defeat at Brentford was like, felt like rock bottom, and then turn that around, and then obviously the Ronaldo saga and other little bits and stuff that he's had to deal with, and the way he's dealt with it and the way he's kept to his word. He's not been bothered, by reputations or egos or who some of these so-called big players are. He's stuck to his guns, and I think that's been a breath of fresh air really, and what the club's needed for a long time. And it's set the marker down now that every single player knows, regardless of who you are, what you stand for. This is what we're about. This is the rules. If you break the rules, there's your punishments, and that's how we go. And I think every successful team, I mean, when I was there, obviously I was there under one of the best managers, if not the best in the world. He had, every single player knew exactly what was expected. He had the utmost respect from everybody because he treated everyone with the same amount of respect, regardless of who you are. And when you've got a club that's running that particular way, everything falls into place, and everyone is singing off the same hymn sheet, and that's exactly what we're seeing now with Ten Hag.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that most of the problems that he resolved came after just 2 defeats. Just 2 defeats. When you look at other managers, and even Fergie, like obviously you can say that there were different problems, but to resolve as much as he did after 2 games, to just go, yes, because if you said that those 2 first games were wins, then we are right in it. We're right at the top challenging, and that's a testament. It is a testament to a manager, because everyone was saying we've had these conversations on last season's podcast. They can, viewers can check them out, and I think that they were indicative of the mood of the time. You could have made sweeping changes in that dressing room, get every single player out, and I don't think people would have been complaining because of how low everybody felt at the time. I mean, people liked Rashford, people liked Bruno, people liked De Gea, but it was kind of like, well, if the broom needs to sweep everybody out, then so be it, because it felt that rotten. So for Ten Hag to do what he's done is miracle working. It really is miracle working.
It is, and I think just on that as well, when you look at the modern day game, obviously it's changed a lot since my day when I was at the club, but the amount of power that the players have nowadays. So for the manager to be able to have such a big impact and make such a massive sort of statement with what he's done with certain individuals, then that for me has took a lot of guts and a lot of cojones, if you like, from him to sort of be that way, because a lot of managers in this modern day are scared of upsetting players and ruffling feathers, because there's such big commodities and the egos that they carry. It's a difficult situation. I think he's done magnificent and probably doesn't get enough credit really for just the amount of sort of turnaround and change he's made in as you said, such a short time, because he's got a really, really difficult job with keeping all the players happy. Obviously players, when they're not in the team, when they're not selected, when they're injured, it's not the best place, and it's a difficult situation for a manager. And I think by all accounts, all the players look like they're in a good place. They all look sort of as though they're buying into what he's saying, and he's done a really good job. And it would be a sort of cherry on the top of the cake this year if he does get a trophy, because I think that's, as I said in previous podcasts, I think if this team under this manager gets a taste for success and a trophy this season, then that could be infectious and carry us through into some really good years ahead.
Yeah, Richard says if we get past Barcelona, we'll win the Europa League no matter what happens in the league, and it's a bold call for sure. Just a couple of comments that I'll come to before we close off. Dave says Ollie won 8 and drew 10 of his first 10 games. Drew 2 of his first 10 games, which is nearly identical to Ten Hag's last 10, but it just feels different. This team seems to want to play as a team. No disrespect to Ollie, but it does. And Patrick makes a similar comment. We've been having a running debate about whether we were in a title race in 2021 when Ollie finished second. I seem to recall we were top for about 2 weeks maximum, and that was in January. I can remember that. And we were sort of like everyone was saying, if we buy a striker, then we've got a good chance, or if we buy another defender, we've got a chance. And then I think, was it Mourinho in January? One time we were second, and we were kind of looking like we might push for it, and we dripped off. And I think these are the calls, aren't they? Really, that United. That's how close, how close or how far away United have actually been challenging for a title. That there's been the hint that it could happen in a January, but they never kicked on from there. And well, I guess we're waiting to see on Sunday whether we are in one or not. But the point remains, I think, as you and I have just said quite emphatically, that Ten Hag is doing a great job regardless. And I know a lot of people, let's say if we lose on Sunday, people will use that as an indication to say that's the difference between Arteta and Ten Hag. But I think the difference between Arteta and Ten Hag is that A, Arteta's had a lot longer in position, and B, it took him a lot longer than 2 games to sort out the issues that were at the club, and he had nowhere near the amount of high-profile nonsense. And I know there was some stuff with Aubameyang, but that was nowhere near as high-profile as the Ronaldo stuff. So win or lose or draw, I still think everyone should be assured that we're moving in the right direction under Ten Hag, and Sunday's result doesn't change that. However, a win probably changes how good we feel about the optimism for the second half of the season. Hopefully Lee will be with us next week to talk about it. Me and Phil will hopefully be back as well, and I will be back on Monday morning with Paul Parker to talk about the result, and hopefully it's a good one to to kick the week off as well. Which next week's going to be another big week for United with a semi-final. Good to have some positive big weeks at United for a change after sort of a period of drifting. Having said that, Ollie got to some semi-finals. Let's not be too unfair to him. We have had semi-finals and finals. It just feels a little bit different this time, as we all know. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to like, please, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching the replay, say hello in the comments. We'd still reply to comments on the replays. If you're listening back on the audio podcast as well, please give us a review and subscribe on the platform you're listening on. We'll be back next week. Until then, have a great weekend, guys, and come on, United.